Thank you. Good morning. We're waiting on one more person who's going to talk about an aspect of the initiative that we're calling for, our 5-point plan of moving this conversation forward. And I think that it's imperative to really examine what we witnessed yesterday. This is clearly, this is not Afghanistan, this is America. And at the cornerstone of what we believe in this country is the right to vote and the right to be part of the process that chooses who will represent us on our local level. We saw the American dream turn into a nightmare when countless number of people stood on lines for a long period of time and were unable to get inside, one, their voting location, two, once they got there, they were unable to actually see their vote count. And the numbers that we witnessed of really a large proportion wasn't a true reflection of the number of voters who came out. Because when you start early in the morning when the election location opens, and then you have to spend 3 hours, 2 hours, an hour waiting, you have to leave to go to your place of employment, drop off your children, or other business, and you really don't have the time to make sure that your votes count. And I asked my staff to get this for me because this is where we are in our electoral process. This is where we are in technology. We're still using antiquated methods, not only in the technology of the machines, but the technology of the mindset of people who are responsible of taking us to the next level. The bureaucratic mindset of this is how we always have done things, and to hear a response that came from the hierarchy of the Board of Election, of talking about wet ballots, talking about people should have known it was going to be a high turnout. This is unexcusable. It rains in New York. And if the methodologies we use to ensure that voters are allowed to vote is not able to be in place merely because it rains, that's a sad commentary. And it shows that we have the wrong people making the decisions on the most important aspect of our society, and that's the right to vote. So I'm joined here with Assemblywoman Weinstein and also one of our poll workers, Eula, who, as we were sitting here talking, she shared her experience on what the day was like. And Assemblywoman Weinstein, one of the committees she started, she was a part of when she was first elected, was the election committee, so she gives us that insight. We count today, yesterday, 49 locations where there were serious problems with voting. It's clear by the time we do our full analysis, we're going to talk about over 100. The thought that we have 19 various districts where texts respond to 2 texts per district, according to what we were told. They ride together in a car to go to a polling site. Even that in itself comes to a level of it's just not common sense. And we have to do a better job. So our 5-point plan calls for, 1, an immediate investigatory hearings on city and state levels to determine responsibility for failure. The state controls the inner mechanism, yet the city put in a great deal of financial capital into ensuring the system is right. We need a larger voice, and we're calling for hearings on all levels, both city and state. Expansion of the poll worker and a coordinator training to incorporate basic optical scanner maintenance and repairs. When several of the sites that I went to, it wasn't that the scanners were not operating, the paper was stuck. And so the poll workers had to wait for someone to come and take the paper jam out. Imagine if the Xerox machine gets stuck at an office and the entire office shuts down to wait for a repair person to come and unclog. Hey, how about teaching the poll workers how to do the basic unclogging of the paper in the scanner so we could continue the process from going forward? If that is not a duh moment, I don't know what is. We have excellent poll workers who are there, committed, dedicated, and they're standing by the side waiting for someone to come and unjam the scanner. That is unacceptable. Number 3, early voting. 33 states have done it already. A 34th state, Michigan, did it yesterday. When your early voting is in place, it allows you the opportunity to iron out any kinks. It gives more than one day. You can't have the most important aspect of government takes place a short period of time, a short window of time. Anything can happen on that particular day. We need early voting. There's no reason we don't have early voting. Number 4, convening technology innovators to test additional solutions for voting modernization. This cannot be our voting system outlook. Brooklyn in particular is the tech center. Let's call on all of our tech thinkers. How do we bring technology into our voting apparatus? You cannot justifiably transfer thousands of dollars on your iPhone. You cannot justifiably track a package that leaves Russia and lands at Kennedy and at your doorstep, and you know it within the minute, but we cannot use technology to increase voter participation. That is unacceptable. We need to change that mindset, and one of the persons that's joining us today is Emil Scandal from Capital Foundry, who's going to talk about some of the technology that we can use. We have to stop being afraid of technology to increase voter participation and how we run our government. 5, and the last, is stakeholder commitment to structural reform. Everyone who's part of the game must be on the field to finally get this resolved. All the stakeholders, everything from our voters, from our poll employees who are there, let's listen to them. They know what is wrong with the system, why we continue to have this problem. Let's give them an opportunity to have a seat at the table. Let our voters weigh in, let our legislators weigh in, let the employees hear. We have some great employees here in the Board of Election, but how often do we speak with them? Those who are on the front line. Think about this for a moment. When we made the transformation from the old machines to this new technology, history has shown when you introduce new methodologies to solve a problem, you normally get a better outcome. Our outcome is becoming worse than when we had the old level and the old machines that we were using. That is a poor indicator after spending millions of dollars on the system, that each year other institutions rehearse before the opening day. This institution seems to believe that the rehearsal is the opening day. That's the wrong mindset. We continue election after election. We can't continue to sing the same song of a broken record in a broken system. The apparatus that is responsible for ensuring the direction of this country and the direction of this city is the voting apparatus, and that apparatus is not functioning at its level that it's supposed to. And so we want the entire community to come and be part of the changes. The humiliation, the embarrassment, the insult, what voters went through yesterday throughout this city, as I went from location to location and heard the complaints. Walking into a location with 5 machines, 3 of them being down, and by the time I walk out, another one goes down and only 1 machine is operating. Paper jams, ballots unable to be accounted, the letters being small, lack of clarity. This is just a fiasco of the election system. It's an embarrassment of the electoral process in this city. And it's not an indictment on every employee who's in the Board of Election, but it is clearly an indictment on the leadership at the Board of Election. Failure of vision to fully see how do we move this system forward so we all can participate in the process. I want to now introduce a partner in government that has really been raising her voice on these issues around reforming this system, Assemblywoman Weinstein.
Thank you, Borough President. As I went around to polling sites in my district, I was at one site where there were a long line of people waiting to put their ballots in the scanner. That was because there were 5 scanners and 4 were down. So there was only one working scanner. And this, as I went around to other sites in my district, I saw the same thing. In 2000, I went down to Florida with a number of other people to count the hanging Chad situation. And some of yesterday reminded me of that disaster in Florida. There are ways we can fix the system. The Borough President outlined some of them. One of the most important things we in the legislature can do as soon as we get back into Albany is to pass the bill that we've done and change the law. We've done it in the Assembly. Now we're going to have partners in the Senate for early voting. If we can get a lot of New Yorkers, some who couldn't stay to vote because of the lines yesterday, and others who would have been less inconvenienced if they could have voted earlier, to vote early, it will ease the burden on Election Day. It will increase turnout, and more New Yorkers will be able to have a say. And we also need to change the date of the primary. We have a crazy system in New York where we have a congressional primary in the spring and then a primary in September. If we do one primary that meets the federal guidelines in the spring, we will save money, and that will more than cover the cost of the early voting. And the Borough President mentioned we have a poll worker here, someone I know. She just walked by and saw us here and told us the horror story of her experience yesterday. The poll workers work tremendously hard, long hours. They deserve more pay. They also deserve to have more people there. It's a little known fact that several years ago, as a way to save money, the Board of Elections expanded the number of people within an election district. What that did is it put extra burdens on each of the voting tables, the EDs, as people came to vote. We need to expand the number of inspectors, add more scanners, early voting, and we have to, obviously, as the Borough President said, we have to look at what went wrong, figure out how to not have that same thing happen again, and see whether we need additional technology, new technology, just better training. This should have been a much smoother experience. It was wonderful. As an elected official, it was wonderful to see the outpouring of people coming to vote. They wanted to have their voice heard, and unfortunately, here in Brooklyn, some people didn't have that opportunity. They waited in the rain for hours and hours just to cast that ballot, and hopefully working together, on the state level, the city level, along with the officials at the board, we can correct this system and provide an expansion of democracy in our city.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman, and you're right. You know, and there's a large call across the city of immediate resignation of who's at the head. Resignation without reform, just bringing another person in a dysfunctional system. The goal now is to find out what is going wrong in this system, and that is part of what we need to determine. And I'm happy to have 2 of our assembly persons here. The other assembly person that's here is Assembly Member Robert Carroll.
Thank you so much, Borough President Eric Adams, for bringing us all here together. Let me tell you my horrible voting story from yesterday. I walk into my polling place, PS 130 in Windsor Terrace. I think there's record turnout. There are hundreds of people in the school cafeteria. The reason why? Every single scanning booth is out of order. Every single one. I wait almost 2 hours to cast my ballot. It is unconscionable that in the 21st century, we have voting apparatuses that do not work. We talk about this every single year. But now, we have control of both houses of the legislature. We have control of the governor's house, of the governor's mansion. If we don't get real voting reforms done, and done in the first month that we are back in session, we're no better than the people in Georgia or North Carolina. And it doesn't stop with early voting. We need to make sure that we make it easier to register to vote. We need to make sure that folks who are on parole and former felons are able to vote. We need to make sure that we are funding all forms of our election processes so we don't throw up our hands after Election Day when people are coming out to vote. We have the power to do this. And if we put our money where our mouth is, we'll actually get it done. This isn't rocket science. So many other states do this. And every year we look at each other and go, how is this possible? We have the technology, we have the resources, we have the means. Now we have to have the political will. We just had a wonderful victory last night. Let's see if we actually do it. So I want to make sure, I know the elected officials standing behind me support this, but we've got to go back to Albany. We've got to have early voting. We've got to have same-day registration. We've got to have same-day party enrollment changes. We've got to make sure that we have modern voting systems like the rest of this country. 37 other states do it. Why don't we? Deep South, deep red states do this. Why don't we? Let's do it now. I am so glad that the Borough President brought us together today. It is unconscionable what happened today. There needs to be a wholesale change of our Election Day processes, and that doesn't start with the resignation of Mike Ryan. That starts with the legislature actually putting in good laws.
Well said, well said. Thank you, Assemblyman. You know, as the Assemblyman pointed out, the Deep South is known for its poll tax and creative ways of denying people the right to access to vote. There's more than one way to create a modern-day poll tax, and we saw that yesterday. We saw barriers to access to vote, and that's what we want to keep in mind. Yesterday was the Board of Elections NYCHA moment, and there's a pattern that's developing in this city where there's a continuation of unable to do those things that is your primary function. Large agencies can't continue to drop the ball on their primary role and primary function. And this is an indicator and reflection. If we don't do the things right, that's your primary function, then the city as a whole is not going to be able to move forward. And so we're also joined by District Leader Nick Rizzo. It's so important that Nick is here with us because the conversation around voting starts with our District Leader Rizzo.
Oh, thank you. Well, first, I would like to thank Borough President Eric Adams, not only for inviting me here, which is not particularly important, but addressing this issue so quickly. I'm impressed by how he responds in a crisis. I'd like to start by making a few broad strokes about where we're at in this country. We are in the biggest crisis of democracy for 150 years in this country. And if you don't believe me, ask a historian. We've had the party that I belong to, the Democratic Party, has won the vast majority of the votes last night in America, as we did 2 years ago, as we did 4 years ago, as we did 6 years ago. And yet, it is not our policies being enacted in America, but these hateful, nationalistic policies bent on ruining our entire world. This is a sort of crisis we are seeing around the world as we increasingly divide in our globalized society into two sorts of people. In America, they are essentially blue people and red people. Those are our colors that we use here, but this conflict exists globally. Blue people generally are urban, though not always. They have absorbed some of the lessons of the 60s counterculture of treating our earth as a thing that matters, as treating people not like you, as things that matter in themselves. The red people are nationalists. They care about those who are like them and not anyone else. And this conflict is not just in the United States. It's in Hungary, it's in Poland, it's in Brazil, it's in Russia, it's in China. It is everywhere in our world. And we as people need to stand up against this. So what does that mean for New Yorkers? Well, New Yorkers, like Los Angelinos, are almost entirely blue people. We sit at the hub of global commerce. And yet here we are, our votes are almost completely disenfranchised. We only, really, the consequential elections for us, most of us yesterday in New York City, were three ballot measures, and they were important, but community boards are not the same thing as the US Senate. And yet for some reason we're frozen out. These millions and millions and millions of people trapped in cities where everyone kind of agrees with us in tolerance. So how do we solve this? I don't exactly know, but I know that it starts with fixing the Board of Elections, and I think the Borough President is exactly right to be focusing on systemic changes to the laws. But honestly, as long as we've got a two-party duopoly running the Board of Elections, only Democrats and Republican insiders picking all these patronage jobs, people like me, we're not gonna fix this thing. So we have to change that if we're going to start saving New York's democracy, so we can start saving America's democracy, so we can start saving this world. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Thank you. And I think the most important person we have here starts with our poll worker, and I want you just to share your experience that's here. She's a little nervous. That's why we're going to make sure that, you know, because people need to hear from you. You're on the ground. You were there yesterday.
Yes.
Your long day. Just share your experience.
Okay, good morning. My name is Eula. I arrived at the poll at 5 p.m. in the morning, and I didn't reach home last night until about 1 o'clock. Okay, one thing I think that the BOE needs to change is training procedures. They should do away with the open book test, because you have people working at the polls who comes there and they just sit there, they don't have a clue to what's going on. So by them giving you a test without the book being open, you'll be able to see whether you know the different type of procedures. Because I think that it's very important that they put workers at the table with you, and one person is doing everything and the other person is just sitting there. Oh, what do I need to do? How to do this? Okay. So it's a very hard job, and I'm a dedicated person, and I just felt that what happened yesterday with the scanners breaking down, and it was so many people there. It was just a terrible experience.
What happened after 9 o'clock? Explain what happened.
Oh, after 9, they closed the doors, and we had to take the people who was there. They couldn't scan their ballots. So after 9 o'clock, we had to take all of the ballots. First, we had to wait until the technician came, right, to open the door to the scanners. We had to take all of the ballots from the box and scan them individually, all of us. And it was so many ballots. So that's why I didn't get home until like about 1 o'clock in the morning, all right? So that was really, yesterday was a bad experience for me. First of all, I had to get home and find somewhere to park. I couldn't find anywhere to park. So I had to walk a couple of blocks because I couldn't find anywhere to park. And that was like frightening. So,
Spell your name first. Spell your name.
Eula, E-U-L-A. That's my first name.
She don't want to give her last name, so she don't want to.
I'll give it.
Following her.
Whaley, W-H-A-L-E-Y. H-A-L-E-Y.
Nothing bad's gonna happen.
Which polling site were you at?
PS 99. Midwood section of Brooklyn.
Can you tell us what was it like? You know what it was like for you? What was it like for people who were voting prior to voting?
They had their children there, and they were on the line and they kept going back and forth because we were in the gymnasium. So we had the front and the back. So they kept going back and forth with the coordinator, because they would come up to the front, and then the scanner would break down. Then she was like, oh, let's go to the back. So it was a back and forth thing yesterday.
People were blaming wet ballots for jamming up the machine.
Well, it was raining yesterday. So people had the umbrellas. So that did happen.
So it really was the rain that was
No, I'm not saying it was the rain, but some people is not gonna, think about that. They came in with their umbrella, so somehow the ballots got, touched their umbrellas.
When you were scanning the ballots, were there a lot of poll workers doing that at once, or
No, they had like in the front they had like 3 scanners, and in the back they had 3. So you had the workers working at the scanner machines.
The Board of Education says there's a bipartisan group of poll workers that scan each of these ballots. Is that what happened?
No, not really. You take your ballot and you mark it and you go to the machine and you scan it individual. But we had to do it individual last night.
Scanners, how many were broken?
All of them, except for one. They kept breaking down.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you. You know that?
See, that wasn't bad.
Look at that. And I think your question about the scanners, the wet ballots is important one. The wet ballots was important one. We need to put that to rest. The wet ballots did not cause this. Whoever's saying that, I was at too many locations where the ballots they were not wet. They were still clogging. You could look at the back of the machine and you could see the ballot there. One just needed to just open up the back and just take the ballot out, and those scanners would have been operating again. The excuse that the ballots were wet, that's wet. That wasn't what was causing the number of scanners not operating at the level. Now we have a close race in the 22nd. How many people did not vote because they couldn't wait? Almost 1,000 person difference in that race. That race can be determined merely because the machines were not operating. All over that district, we were hearing about people had to leave, they couldn't vote, they didn't have time to do their paper ballot. So we're actually impacting the outcome of elections because of failing and flawed technology. And that's going to lead to our last 2 speakers. First, I want to bring on the Councilman Espinal, who has really been on the cutting edge of a lot of thinking about the reform and using technology. And then we want to bring on the last speaker is Emil Scandal from Capital Foundry.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Thank you, Eric, for setting up this important press conference. It's really disheartening to be here. It's unfortunate that every year we have to talk about a new problem that the BOE has created for the voters of our city. It was very encouraging to see so many New Yorkers line up and be able to exercise their right and democratic responsibility of being involved in the election process. What was discouraging was a disaster that we saw happen when voters were actually leaving those lines because the machines weren't working the proper way and because BOE did not do its proper function of making sure that the election goes smoothly. So I'm very encouraged to hear that the state is ready to take action. We need early voting. We need to make sure that we have the laws in place to ensure that everyone has play a role in the process. If we had early voting, the rain would not have been a problem. If we had early voting, there wouldn't be long lines, and more people would not have been disfranchised as we saw yesterday. So it's very encouraging to hear that we're going to take action, but it's very discouraging to see what had happened yesterday. So thank you all for taking action on this issue.
Thank you, Councilman. And lastly, it's important, I know many of you know I'm the technology borough president. It's time to use innovation and technology to run this city, and we have been partnered with several different technology organizations and institutions of bringing our city into the 21st century. So we would like Emil to come from Capital Foundry and give some of the ideas around technology. Emil, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Borough President Adams. Elected officials and members of the press. My name is Emil Scandal, and I'm here as a technology advocate. I'm here today because we need more advocacy for better election technology. We are simply behind the times. Yesterday's failure at polling stations around the city is a sign that we've neglected to take care of our electoral process. We can point fingers at failures, but today we've come here to offer solutions for improving how New Yorkers cast their ballots. The issue at hand is a simple one. It's ballot access as a result of bad technology and processes. You may think it's so easy for any New Yorker to get to a poll site and to cast a ballot, but it's not. Not all New Yorkers can afford to take time away from their jobs, from their kids, from their commitments. Not all New Yorkers can physically get to poll sites. And when they do arrive, not all New Yorkers can wait on long lines to fill out a ballot or scan one. And when a scanner becomes broken, it fundamentally undermines our faith in democratic process. Famed political theorist Alexis de Tocqueville said over 200 years ago, Americans believe their strength of government they believe their system of government is their strength. They're mistaken. It is their belief in their system of government that is their strength. When DRE's direct electronic machines fail to capture voter intent in Georgia, it is a sign that our electoral system isn't working. When error rates are as high as 3 to 4% for DREs and 2% for paper ballots, it's a sign that our design and technology is failing. Our democracy is being driven in a mid-90s Oldsmobile that stutters when it starts, haphazardly responds to the driver, and can be lifted from a lot in the daytime. At the wheel are our election officials, with the electorate as the deer gazing in the headlights. We need to ask ourselves, how have we allowed our election technology to continue to fail us? Last week, Jeff Bezos here in New York declared that 10 or 12,000 people have worked on Alexa and Echo. According to him, it's technically one of the hardest things that's ever been done. It's not hard to imagine the possibilities if just a fraction of this collective brain power were set upon rebuilding our nation's or New York's critical election infrastructure. If our democracy is as precious as we claim it to be, we would be spending significant energy on protecting our elections. And if we're as democratic as we say we are, we would be making our elections as accessible as possible. By all means, this means online voting in the future. Yesterday, service members abroad were able to cast their ballots in West Virginia's elections using mobile phones, and being verified by biometric data. It is a limited pilot, but it's promising. Here in our city, New Yorkers can vote online for discretionary spending in New York City's participatory budgeting process. It's not as secure, but we can begin testing more robust solutions for that. We need to begin discussing better technology options today. Let's start with the most obvious. Let's push for early voting and mail-in ballots. From there, let's overhaul the design of paper ballots and ensure that redundancies are in place so that when scanners fail, we have a backup plan. Finally, let's start to discuss online voting and take it seriously. Let's bring together leaders, let's bring together technologists to discuss this. This will happen. The greatest form of voter suppression is forcing voters to a physical polling place when they could be voting from their own homes. We cannot tell ourselves we are such a progressive city when we are so digitally regressive. With all the threats to our current voting systems, along with the need for significant security upgrades, we should be looking to solve one of the greatest threats to our democracy, voting access as a result of outdated modes of balloting. We shouldn't be looking to install LoJack on an Oldsmobile when a Tesla is around the corner.
Well said, well said, well said. This is the globe. This is the Board of Election. That is the question that we must raise, and that is why we ask our technology experts to come and be part of this conversation. I think the information that came from the poll employee on the ground, you marry that with the legislators, and you marry that with the technology. We will remove this outdated methodology and come into the 21st century. You cannot continue to have a cassette tape mindset in an iPhone age. It does not fit unless your goal is not to count every ballot. If that's the goal, then you stay here. And we want to also have a representative from Senator Montgomery's office. We want to thank her for being here as well, and all of the legislators that took the time to come out and say, let's move this conversation forward. We're open to any questions at this time. Again, I think the call for resignation is the easiest thing to do. We've had different heads of the Board of Election and got the same results. So before we start saying who needs to go, who needs to stay, let's do an analysis of what the problem is, and then the outcome of that analysis should determine what level should be gone, what level should stay. There's really a problem at the top that needs to be addressed, but there's a countless number of staffers here who are smart, who are innovative, and want to do a good job. The problem I've learned historically, the problem starts from the top.
Is this like a third world voting system, and so why?
I think it is, because no matter, the bottom line is inability to have access to vote. It doesn't matter if it's landmines in South Africa when they first started. It doesn't matter if it's outdated equipment in Afghanistan. No matter what it is, it comes down to the same result. The inability to have access to cast your ballot. That is the end result. So yes, this is as third world as you can get, and we have to move into, as it was mentioned, in the technology to break that gap that's preventing people from to have access to vote.
Some of the close races, the 22nd district being one. At the poll site where you were at yesterday, there seemed to be some confusion about what to do when those scanners broke down, whether they should put a number in the ballot boxes or actually have poll workers feed them a scanner. That being said, is there any concern about the validity of these election results as they've been announced so far?
Well, it's concerning. Particularly, I was in the 22nd senatorial district, and the number of people who came out and said, I can't wait any longer. I want to vote for you. The candidate who was standing with me, Senator-elect Andrew Gonatas, they said, I want to vote for you, but I can't wait any longer. And so he has this close margin of 1,000 votes. How many votes he did not receive because people couldn't wait any longer? As it was mentioned, people, when they come out to vote, they have other obligations and responsibilities that day. And so it's not just the fact that I could fill out a paper ballot, it's the fact that people could not stay and wait to even get in to fill out that paper ballot. This is a major issue.
Are you concerned with the results as they've been counted so far of the election? Another count? I know the BOE is going to go over. Do you have confidence that they're going to be able to canvass those votes?
I think the people have spoken. I think that Senator-elect Gonatas is up over 1,000 votes. I think the people have spoken. I think that gap would have been wider based on my time there, the number of people who wanted to but couldn't. And so now we have the paper ballot system in place. We're going to see the outcome of the paper ballots.
Eric, what would it take to get voted?
As the Assemblyman stated, the will. We had a Republican-controlled Senate that did not have the will. No matter how many times the Assembly was willing to push this forward, you need both houses to agree on it. It is really just the will. You can't have 33 states who's doing it. We need the will now, and I think you have the will with the control of the Democrats and control of the Senate.
And why do you're talking about technology, trying new technology that's available, other states are using it. Why do you think there is such reluctance?
That is an amazing question. And I'm finding here and throughout our governmental agencies, we have too many people at the helm or upper management who is still caught in the 20th century as we need to move forward to the 21st century. And we have to really compel them to not be afraid of technology, as it was mentioned. We have great experts on this topic. To think that we're still using this antiquated method to count ballots when we don't use it in any other part of our lives. That is the problem. Too many people in the system are not willing to move from their comfort zone of understanding there's a different way to do so. Bureaucratic inertia is hurting this process.
Well, we also need to spend the money. We need to spend the money. This is a state issue. Consistently, there are members of the legislature, when we talk about voting reforms, be they early voting, be they electronic poll books, and it comes in time and again, where is the money? The governor and the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, need to step up and fund these electoral reforms. Because guess what? In New York City, we can fund it. But there are counties upstate that can't. We're going to need the legislature to put our money where our mouth is again and say, you know what? in the Finger Lakes, in the Adirondacks, in the Southern Tier. We're going to fund your early voting. We're going to fund your electronic poll books, because guess what? If we don't fund it up there, we won't get it in New York City.
Yes. Right. Yesterday was a dress rehearsal for 2020. The curtain will rise on 2020, and we cannot have what happened yesterday. And so, yes, these are low-hanging fruits. This is not complicated, as the Assemblywoman stated. This is not complicated. These are low-hanging fruits. The problem is within reach. We just have to extend our arm and make it happen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.